We all know the story. King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans standing at the hot gates of Thermopylae, holding off an empire. It is the ultimate historical power fantasy. The Spartan Mirage paints them as a perfectly self-sufficient society of peerless warriors, men who needed nothing but their brothers in arms and the bronze on their backs. But achieving that level of military perfection required a bizarre legislative paradox. The legendary lawmaker Lycurgus passed a strict mandate. He made it highly illegal for a Spartan citizen to do any actual work. Farming was banned, crafting was a crime, trade was strictly forbidden. A Spartiate had exactly one legal profession available to him: lifelong, grueling military training. To ensure no one got distracted by wealth, the state banned gold and silver entirely. Instead, they forced citizens to use long, awkward iron bars as currency, making it mathematically impossible to easily hoard cash or bribe an official. By legally requiring their elite class to do nothing but fight and eat, the Spartans created a massive logistical void. The most feared military state in the ancient world survived entirely on the back of an invisible, highly fragile supply chain. At the very bottom of that supply chain were the Helots. These were subjugated, state-owned slaves forced to cultivate the 9,000 agricultural plots that generated Sparta's food. This population chart visualizes a staggering demographic reality. For every one Spartan citizen, there were roughly 7 Helot slaves. Keeping a population suppressed when they outnumber you by a 7-to-1 margin creates constant, suffocating paranoia. The Spartans lived in perpetual fear that their caloric engine would rise up and slaughter them in their sleep. To maintain control, the state relied on state-sanctioned terror. Every single year, Sparta ritually declared war on the Helots, allowing citizens to murder them without incurring religious guilt. They even deployed a secret police force, the Krypteia, to hunt down and assassinate any slave showing leadership potential. The true purpose of the legendary Spartan military comes into focus here. They were rarely conquering new empires. They operated primarily as an internal police force, permanently occupying their own territory. Above the slaves, managing 30,000 plots of land and running the entire manufacturing economy, were the perioikoi. The word translates to dwellers around, and they formed the unsung industrial middle class of the Spartan machine. Take a close look at the equipment on this bronze hoplite figurine: the iconic interlocking shield, the iron sword, the heavy bronze breastplate. A Spartan citizen never forged a single one of those items. The iron and copper were pulled from the earth and hammered into weapons by the perioikoi in specialized mining settlements like Malaya and Skiritis. Then there is the famous Spartan red and purple cloak. On the battlefield, wearing that dye commanded instant respect and identified a soldier as part of the elite. But the Spartiates didn't make the dye. Perioikoi merchants operating out of the coastal port city of Githaion painstakingly extracted it from thousands of these specific murex sea snails. Later, during the Peloponnesian War, when Sparta needed to project power across the Aegean Sea, it was the perioikoi who felled the timber, built the warships, and sailed them. The terrifying, legendary warrior we remember today was entirely the end product of a massive, exploited industrial complex. The warriors were simply the operators of a machine they were legally forbidden from building. This line graph maps a terminal disease within the Spartan state, oliganthropia. It translates roughly to a shortage of men, and it represented a severe, continuous decline in the number of full Spartan citizens. Strict wealth requirements for citizenship, extreme birth controls, constant battlefield casualties, and a stubborn refusal to assimilate outsiders meant the elite class was bleeding out. By the 4th century BC, it became mathematically impossible to field a massive citizen army. Sparta had to compromise. By the 3rd century BC, the bulk of the so-called Spartan military was actually made up of the very perioikoi and armed Helots they had spent centuries oppressing. The fatal blow finally landed in 371 BC at the Battle of Lectra. A Theban army defeated the Spartans on the field, permanently shattering the psychological illusion of their invincibility. But the victors didn't stop at the battlefield. They marched into Spartan territory and surgically dismantled the supply chain. They liberated the Mesene region, stripping Sparta of its Helot slave labor and severing the perioikoi manufacturing hubs. Deprived of the people who grew their food and forged their bronze, the Spartan state immediately collapsed into irrelevance. They had spent hundreds of years forbidding themselves from learning how to survive on their own. The true legacy of Sparta is a warning. No society, regardless of how heavily armed or heavily mythologized it becomes, can survive if it remains permanently at war with its own foundational population.